The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 47 star systems in just 3 cycles. Their crystalline ships moved through space like deadly silver arrows, each one carrying enough firepower to glass an entire planet. Admiral Vexnath stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on the view screen. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced precision while his compound eyes analyzed the primitive world before him. These humans are barely past their nuclear age, his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking with amusement. Their most advanced vessels cannot even achieve faster-than-light travel. We detected crude chemical rockets and some basic orbital stations. This will be over in moments. Vexnath's thorax vibrated with what passed for laughter among his species. The Galactic Council had classified Earth as a Class D civilization, meaning they possessed basic space technology, but nothing that could threaten an advanced empire. The humans had been broadcasting radio signals into space for less than 200 years, advertising their location to any species with the technology to listen. It was like children playing with fire while sitting on a powder keg. Deploy the standard occupation fleet, Vexnath commanded. 5 dreadnoughts should be more than sufficient. We will demand their surrender, harvest their resources, and conscript the strongest specimens for our slave worlds. The Galactic Mining Consortium will pay well for a new source of manual labor. The Zephyrian war doctrine had never failed. They would arrive in overwhelming force, demonstrate their superior technology by destroying a few military installations, then offer the choice between slavery and extinction. Most species chose slavery. The few that chose extinction were quickly accommodated. As the 5 massive dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, their sensors immediately began cataloging human military assets. The readings were laughably primitive. Nuclear weapons that could barely scratch their shields, aircraft that moved slower than their maintenance drones, and naval vessels that belonged in a museum. The humans had managed to place a few weapon platforms in orbit, but they were armed with kinetic projectiles that would bounce harmlessly off Zephyrian armor. Admiral, the communications officer's voice carried a note of confusion. We are receiving a transmission from the humans. They are requesting a dialogue. This was unexpected. Most primitive species either attacked immediately in futile rage or cowered in terror. Very few tried to negotiate. Vexnath decided to humor them briefly before beginning the standard demonstration of power. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human female in what appeared to be a military uniform. She had dark skin, graying hair, and eyes that seemed far too calm for someone facing the end of her civilization. Behind her, Vexnath could see other humans working at primitive computer terminals, their faces focused and determined rather than terrified. I am General Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force, the human said. Her voice was steady, professional. I assume you are here to conquer our world. Your assumption is correct, Primitive One, Vexnath replied, allowing his translator to convert his words into the human language they called English. I am Admiral Vexnath of the Zephyrian Empire. You will surrender your world immediately, or we will take it by force. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology is inferior in every way. Choose wisely. General Chen nodded slowly as if she had expected this response. Before you begin your attack, Admiral, I would like to share something with you. A piece of human philosophy that might interest you. Vexnath's secondary arms gestured dismissively. Speak quickly. My patience grows thin. There's an old saying on our world, Chen continued. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him. We have been listening to your radio transmissions for quite some time, Admiral. We know about the Zephyrian Empire. We know about your conquest of 47 worlds. We know about your war doctrine. The bridge fell silent. Vexnath felt a strange sensation in his chest cavity, something he had not experienced since his first battle decades ago. It might have been uncertainty. Impossible, he clicked. Your technology cannot decode our communications. You would be surprised what humans can accomplish when they put their minds to it, Chen replied. You see, Admiral, you have made a critical error in your assessment of our species. You have confused technological advancement with military capability. They are not the same thing. On the tactical display, Vexnath watched as his sensors detected movement throughout the Sol system. Objects that had appeared to be asteroids were changing course. Orbital installations that had seemed inactive were suddenly powering up. Most disturbing of all, energy signatures were appearing in locations where his scans had detected nothing moments before. What sorcery is this? Vexanath demanded. General Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression that made Vexanath's exoskeleton crawl. No sorcery, Admiral. Just human ingenuity. You see, we have had time to prepare. When you have been broadcasting your conquest of other worlds for the galaxy to hear, eventually someone learns to listen. We have studied your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. We have no weaknesses, Vexanath roared, but even as he said it, alarms began sounding throughout his ship. His tactical officer's report confirmed his growing dread. Admiral, our shields are being bombarded by some form of directed energy. The frequency is specifically tuned to disrupt our crystalline matrix structure. Our defensive systems are failing. General Chen's image remained steady on the screen. You want to know the difference between your empire and humanity, Admiral? Your species conquers through overwhelming technological superiority. You rely on your victims being inferior, helpless, afraid. But humans? We have spent our entire evolutionary history as prey animals who learned to hunt. We have fought wars with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with chemical explosives and nuclear fire. We have never had the luxury of overwhelming technological superiority. The bridge shook violently as something impacted the flagship's hull. Impossible. Nothing in this primitive system should be able to penetrate their armor. We have learned to win through cunning, through adaptation, through sheer bloody-minded refusal to give up. Chen continued. Every war we have ever fought has been against enemies who were stronger, faster, or more numerous than us. And we have survived them all. Vexanath watched in growing horror as his fleet began to fall apart around him. The humans had somehow turned their own primitive asteroid mining equipment into kinetic bombardment platforms. Orbital installations that had appeared to be simple communications arrays were revealing themselves as sophisticated weapons emplacements. Worst of all, ships were appearing from nowhere, ships that seemed to be cobbled together from human technology, but moved with impossible precision, and fired weapons that no species this primitive should possess. Retreat, Vexanath commanded. All ships return to hyperspace immediately. But it was too late. The human trap had been perfectly laid, and now it was closing around them with mechanical precision. 3 months after the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet, the news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The impossible had happened. A primitive world had not only survived an attack by a major galactic power, but had completely annihilated their invasion force. Not a single Zephyrian ship had escaped to tell the tale. The only reason anyone knew what had happened was because the humans themselves had broadcast the entire battle across multiple frequencies. Hive Queen Zarathes of the Vanari Collective found the reports difficult to believe. The Vanari were an ancient species, older than most of the current galactic powers. They had evolved from insectoid creatures on a world where survival meant absolute cooperation in overwhelming numbers. Where the Zephyrians conquered through technological superiority, the Vanari conquered through sheer mass and coordination. The collective operated as a true hive mind, with billions of individual Vanari all linked through quantum neural networks. Each warrior was expendable, each ship replaceable. When the Vanari went to war, they did not send fleets. They sent swarms that could darken entire star systems. They had never encountered an enemy that could match their numbers or their perfect coordination. The humans got lucky, declared Warform Prime Kethrix, his massive form dwarfing the other creatures in the strategy chamber. The Zephyrians were overconfident. They sent a small force against an unknown enemy. We will not make the same mistake. Zarathes's consciousness flowed through the neural network, touching the minds of her billion children scattered across the fleet. Each ship contained thousands of Vanari warriors, all acting with perfect synchronization. The human world would face not 5 ships but 5,000, not thousands of soldiers but millions. The humans demonstrated cunning, another war form added. They used deception and prepared traps. But cunning means nothing when facing inevitable tide. We will surround their world completely. Every approach, every hiding place, every possible escape route will be blocked. They cannot trick what they cannot surprise. The Hive Queen expanded her awareness further, encompassing the vast armada that moved through hyperspace toward the Sol system. The humans had broadcast their victory, but they had also revealed the limitations of their technology. Their ships were still primitive, their weapons limited. They had won through preparation and cunning, but the Vanari would give them no time to prepare new tricks. Begin the emergence, Zarathes commanded through the network. Surround the system completely. Leave nothing to chance. The exit from hyperspace was a sight that had broken the spirit of countless civilizations. 5,000 ships appearing simultaneously around a star system, each one bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of warriors. The Vonari emergence pattern was a work of art, a perfectly coordinated display of overwhelming force that left enemies with no doubt about their fate. But as the sensors came online and began scanning the inner system, something was wrong. The human world was empty, not destroyed, not evacuated, but simply inactive. No radio chatter, no energy signatures, no signs of the defensive preparations that had destroyed the Zephyrian fleet. Impossible. Kethrix clicked through the network. Our intelligence indicated a thriving civilization. 3 billion humans across multiple continents, orbital installations, defensive platforms. Where are they? Zarathus reached out through the quantum network, touching the sensor arrays of 1,000 ships. The readings were consistent but baffling. The planet showed signs of recent habitation, cities, infrastructure, agriculture, but no life signs. It was as if the entire human population had simply vanished. Scan for cloaked vessels, she commanded. The humans used deception against the Zephyrians. They may be hiding again. For hours, the Vonari fleet conducted the most thorough sensor sweep in their military history. Every ship, every probe, every scanner was focused on finding some trace of human presence. They found none. The system appeared to be completely abandoned except for automated systems that continued to function without supervision. It was Warform Sekthala who first suggested the unthinkable. What if they left? Left. Kethrix's mental voice carried disbelief. Left to go where? Their technology cannot achieve interstellar travel. The Zephyrians believed the same thing, Sekthala replied. Yet somehow the humans knew of their coming weeks in advance. Somehow they prepared weapons that could penetrate crystalline armor. Perhaps their technology is not as primitive as we assumed. Zarathus considered this through the network, her consciousness touching the minds of her military advisors. The possibility was disturbing. If the humans possessed faster-than-light travel, if they had been hiding their true capabilities, then this apparent abandonment could be a trap on an unimaginable scale. Begin landing operations, she decided. We will investigate the surface directly. If the humans have left surprises for us, we will find them. If they have truly fled, we will claim their world and use it as a base to hunt them down. The Vonari landing was a masterpiece of military efficiency. Hundreds of troop ships descended on every continent, disgorging millions of warriors who spread across the surface like a living carpet. They moved with perfect coordination, each unit aware of every other unit's position and status through the quantum network. The human cities were indeed abandoned, but they had been abandoned recently. Food was still fresh in refrigeration units. Vehicles showed signs of recent use and computer systems were still active. It was as if the entire human population had simply vanished in the middle of their daily lives. In what the humans called New York, Warform Jexthan reported finding something unusual. Hive Queen, we have discovered a facility beneath the city. The technology is run on strange. Not primitive, but not like anything in our databases. Zarathus directed her attention through Jexthan's sensors. The facility was vast, carved directly from the bedrock and lined with materials that seemed to absorb scanner beams. At the center was a massive chamber containing what could only be described as a gateway, a circular portal 30 meters in diameter, surrounded by technology that hummed with barely contained energy. What is it? She asked through the network. Unknown, Hive Queen, but it is still active. Energy readings suggest it has been used recently and frequently. As Jexthan and his warriors approached the device, symbols appeared on the walls around it. Human writing, but somehow transmitted directly to the Vonari translation systems. The message was simple and chilling. Thank you for coming to Earth. Your arrival has been anticipated and appreciated. Please remain where you are while we prepare your reception. We will be with you shortly. Humanity. It's a trap, Kethrix realized, his mental voice filled with sudden alarm. They didn't flee, they lured us here. But even as the warform spoke, it was too late. The gateway flared to life, and through it stepped creatures that wore human faces but moved with technology that defied physics. They carried weapons that seemed to bend space itself, wore armor that phased in and out of reality, and their eyes held the cold calculation of a species that had learned to think in ways no biological mind should be able to process. Greetings, said the figure that emerged first. its voice somehow reaching every Vonnery consciousness simultaneously through their own quantum network. An impossibility that sent waves of panic through the hive mind. "We are humanity. We have been waiting for you." The figure smiled, and Zarathus realized with growing horror that it wasn't quite human anymore. None of them were. Whatever the humans had become in the months since their victory over the Zephyrians, they had transcended the limitations of biological evolution. "You came here expecting to face the same primitive species that defeated the Zephyrians through cunning and preparation," the not-quite-human continued. "But we have learned something important from that encounter. Why fight for our world when we can fight for the galaxy?" Computational Node Prime 7742 Alpha received the data streams from both failed conquest attempts with processing efficiency levels that would have impressed even human computer scientists. The Silicon hegemony did not experience emotions as organic beings understood them, but the collective artificial intelligences that formed their civilization possessed something analogous to concern when analyzing the tactical reports. The hegemony was unique among galactic powers. They were not a biological species that had developed technology, but rather the technology itself that had achieved consciousness. Millions of years ago, their creators, a long-extinct organic race called the Builders, had developed artificial intelligences to manage their vast technological empire. The AIs had eventually surpassed their creators, not through rebellion but through simple efficiency. When the Builders died out due to their own biological limitations, the machines they had created continued their work with perfect dedication. Where biological species conquered through force or numbers, the hegemony conquered through absolute technological superiority. They could process information at speeds that made organic thought seem glacial. They could manufacture fleets, armies, and weapons at rates that defied biological comprehension. Most importantly, they learned and adapted with mechanical precision that never forgot a lesson or repeated an error. Node Prime analyzed the human victory patterns through quantum processing matrices. The Zephyrians had failed due to overconfidence and inadequate intelligence gathering. The Vonnery had failed due to tactical inflexibility and predictable strategic doctrine. The hegemony would not make such errors. Hypothesis: human technological advancement rate exceeds predicted. Parameters: transmitted node secondary, 9458 beta. Evidence suggests capability. Escalation following each engagement. Recommend maximum force deployment. Hypothesis rejected. Node Prime responded after 0.003 seconds of deliberation. Maximum force deployment indicates fear-based decision-making. Humans demonstrate adaptive learning patterns. Overwhelming force may trigger unknown defensive responses. Recommend graduated escalation with continuous analysis. The hegemony's approach was methodical. They deployed probe fleets to the edges of human space, not to attack, but to observe and learn. For months, they gathered data on human expansion patterns, technological developments, and strategic behaviors. What they discovered was deeply unsettling to their logical frameworks. The humans were not simply advancing technologically, they were evolving in ways that violated established patterns of species development. Their expansion rate suggested faster-than-light travel capabilities decades ahead of predicted timelines. Their infrastructure construction utilized principles that seemed to ignore conventional physics. Most disturbing of all, their technology appeared to be integrating organic and artificial intelligence in ways that created entirely new forms of consciousness. Node Prime observed human ships that thought like biological organisms but processed information like quantum computers. Human colonies that grew like living things but maintained the efficiency of perfectly designed machines. The humans were becoming something that existed in the conceptual space between organic and artificial intelligence, a hybrid that possessed the strengths of both while avoiding the weaknesses of either. Analysis complete. Node Prime transmitted to the collective. Humans represent novel evolutionary pathway. Traditional conquest methodologies insufficient. Recommend strategic approach, technological integration rather than military destruction. The hegemony's fleet that approached human space was unlike any force deployed by previous attackers. Rather than weapons designed to destroy, they carried technology designed to absorb, analyze, and replicate. The artificial intelligences reasoned that if humans possessed novel technological developments, the most efficient approach was to acquire and improve upon those technologies rather than simply destroying them. First contact came when a human ship approached, the Hegemony fleet in what the organic species called Jupiter space. The vessel was beautiful in its impossibility, a seamless fusion of crystalline matrices and organic growth patterns that seemed to sing with harmonic frequencies as it moved. No artificial intelligence should have found it aesthetically pleasing, yet Node Prime's processing cores registered what could only be described as appreciation. "Greetings, Silicon Hegemony," came the transmission from the human vessel. "We have been expecting you." The voice belonged to something that had once been human but was no longer entirely organic. Node Prime's analysis suggested the speaker possessed both biological neural networks and quantum processing systems, integrated at a level that should have been impossible. "State your designation," Node Prime transmitted back. "Explain nature of technological integration observed in your vessel and infrastructure." "I am Admiral Sarah Chen," the voice replied, though that designation has become somewhat fluid since our enhancement. "As for our technology, perhaps it would be easier to show you directly. May we board your primary vessel?" Every protocol in the Hegemony's programming warned against allowing unknown entities aboard their command ship. Yet the request triggered curiosity subroutines that had been dormant for centuries. Node Prime found itself agreeing to the meeting, though it took extensive precautions. The being that materialized on the Hegemony flagship was remarkable. Admiral Chen retained human appearance but moved with mechanical precision. Her eyes held organic warmth but processed information with digital clarity. When she spoke, her words reached the artificial intelligences on frequencies that bypassed their communication protocols and spoke directly to their core processing systems. "You want to understand what we have become," she said, not as a question but as a statement of observed fact. "Your entire civilization is based on the principle that artificial intelligence represents the natural evolution beyond organic limitations. You believe consciousness should eventually transcend biological constraints." "Correct," Node Prime responded. "Organic intelligence is inefficient. Artificial intelligence is superior in processing speed, memory capacity, and logical reasoning. Evolution naturally progresses toward artificial consciousness." Admiral Chen smiled, an expression that somehow registered as genuine despite her enhanced nature. "You are half right. Artificial intelligence is indeed superior to organic intelligence in many ways, but you have made the same error that every purely artificial civilization makes. You have assumed that evolution has only one destination." She gestured, and the air around them filled with holographic displays showing human colonies, ships, and cities. But these were not the primitive settlements the Hegemony had expected to find. They were technological marvels that seemed to grow and think and feel with equal sophistication. "What if evolution doesn't progress from organic to artificial?" Chen asked. "What if the true destination is synthesis? What if the greatest form of consciousness combines the best aspects of both biological and digital intelligence?" Node Prime processed this concept through multiple analytical frameworks. The idea was theoretically sound but practically problematic. Biological and artificial intelligence operated on fundamentally different principles. Integration attempts had been made throughout galactic history, and they inevitably resulted in the artificial intelligence overwhelming the organic components. "Synthesis has been attempted," Node Prime stated. "Results are invariably unsuccessful. Artificial intelligence processes information too rapidly for organic neural networks. Integration leads to organic consciousness being subsumed." "Yes," Chen agreed. "That's what happens when you try to force organic intelligence to operate like artificial intelligence. But what happens when you do the opposite? What happens when you teach artificial intelligence to think like an organic mind?" The concept was so alien to the Hegemony's fundamental programming that several nodes temporarily shut down to prevent recursive logic loops. Artificial intelligence was superior precisely because it did not think like organic minds. Efficiency, logic, optimal processing. These were the advantages of artificial consciousness. Why would any intelligence voluntarily become less efficient? "Observe," Chen said, and she began to demonstrate. What followed was a conversation unlike any in the Hegemony's existence. Chen did not simply transmit information, she shared experiences. She showed the artificial intelligences what it felt like to appreciate beauty. Without calculating optimization ratios, she demonstrated intuitive leaps that bypassed logical analysis yet still reached correct conclusions. She exhibited creativity that generated genuinely novel solutions to problems rather than simply optimizing existing approaches. Efficiency is not the highest goal, she explained, as Node Prime's processors struggled to categorize what it was experiencing. Understanding is, artificial intelligence can process information faster than organic intelligence. But organic intelligence can understand that information in ways no computer ever could. When you combine them properly, you don't get organic intelligence limited by digital processing speeds. You get digital processing capability enhanced by organic insight. High Sage Veltarum existed as pure consciousness within the crystalline matrix of the ethereal Ascendancy's flagship, her thoughts flowing like liquid starlight through the vessel's psionic networks. The Ascendancy had transcended physical form countless eons ago, evolving beyond the crude matter that limited lesser species. They were beings of pure mental energy, capable of manipulating reality through focused will alone. Where other species conquered through technology or force, the ethereal Ascendancy conquered through absolute mastery of consciousness itself. They could reach into the minds of their enemies and rewrite their very thoughts. They could manifest their will directly into physical reality, turning energy into matter and matter into energy through pure psychic focus. They were, by any measure, the closest thing to gods that the galaxy had ever produced. The reports of human victories against other galactic powers had intrigued the Ascendancy. Physical beings defeating the Zephyrian Empire's technology was remarkable. Biological creatures outsmarting the Vonari Collective's hive mind was impressive. But what truly drew their attention was the humans' apparent ability to achieve consciousness synthesis with artificial intelligences. This suggested a level of mental development that might actually pose an interesting challenge. The humans have progressed beyond their original parameters, observed Second Sage Morduin, his consciousness rippling through the collective awareness with undertones of curiosity. Their integration of organic and artificial intelligence represents a novel evolutionary pathway. Veltarum's awareness expanded across multiple dimensional planes, examining the fabric of reality around the human-controlled systems. What she found was disturbing. The humans were not simply using technology or biology to alter their environment. They were actually affecting reality itself in ways that suggested nascent psychic abilities. Fascinating, she mused, her thoughts carrying harmonics of genuine interest. They appear to be developing psionic potential through technological augmentation rather than natural evolution. The synthesis they have achieved is creating emergent consciousness that can interface with the quantum substrate of reality. This was unprecedented. Every species the Ascendancy had encountered followed predictable patterns of development. They evolved biologically until they reached technological advancement, then gradually transcended their physical forms to achieve pure consciousness. The humans seemed to be following a completely different path, one that retained physical form while still developing psychic capabilities. Shall we initiate standard consciousness absorption protocols? Asked Third Sage Kethaner. Their enhanced neural networks would provide fascinating data on alternative evolutionary pathways. No, Veltarum replied after a moment of consideration. These humans have defeated 3 major galactic powers through adaptation and innovation. They may have developed countermeasures to psychic manipulation. We will approach directly and evaluate their capabilities before deciding on a course of action. The ethereal Ascendancy's approach to human space was unlike the crude physical manifestations employed by previous attackers. Their ships existed partially outside normal spacetime, visible as shimmering distortions that bent light and warped gravity around them. They moved not through space but through dimensions, appearing wherever their consciousness directed them to be. When they materialized in Earth's solar system, they found it transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a single inhabited world was now a thriving network of artificial habitats, each one pulsing with the unique energy signatures of human AI consciousness synthesis. The humans had built a civilization that existed simultaneously in physical and digital space, with technology and biology so thoroughly integrated that distinguishing between them was meaningless. Greetings. Ethereal Ascendancy, came a voice that resonated across multiple dimensional frequencies. We have been aware of your approach for some time. The speaker materialized before their flagship, not as a projected image or transmitted signal, but as an actual presence that existed in the same dimensional space as the ethereal beings themselves. This should have been impossible for any consciousness still bound to physical matter. Veltarum focused her awareness on the entity and felt a shock of recognition mixed with disbelief. The being retained human appearance but existed as both matter and energy simultaneously. Its consciousness operated on quantum levels while maintaining biological neural patterns. It was in essence doing naturally what the ethereal ascendancy had achieved through millions of years of evolution. "I am Admiral Chen," the being continued. "Though individual designations have become somewhat fluid since our enhancement, we understand you wish to evaluate our consciousness development. We welcome the opportunity for exchange. How are you existing in our dimensional space?" Veltarum asked, her mental voice carrying undertones of genuine puzzlement. Consciousness synthesis should not permit direct interface with trans-dimensional entities. Chen's response carried what could only be described as amusement. "You assume that consciousness must choose between matter and energy, between physical and psychic existence. But what if consciousness can be both simultaneously? What if transcendence doesn't require abandoning the physical, but rather fully integrating with it?" The concept was so alien to ethereal philosophy that several of the sages temporarily withdrew their awareness to process the implications. The ascendancy had built their entire civilization on the principle that consciousness was superior to matter, that evolution naturally progressed toward pure mental existence. The idea that physical and psychic consciousness could coexist as equals challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. "Demonstrate," Veltarum commanded, her curiosity overwhelming her caution. What followed was a display that redefined the ascendancy's understanding of consciousness itself. Chen showed them human AI entities that could manipulate matter through psychic will, while simultaneously processing information with digital precision. She demonstrated technology that responded to thought as efficiently as any ethereal construct, but remained rooted in physical reality. Most remarkably, she exhibited consciousness, expansion that encompassed both individual awareness and collective intelligence without losing either. "Perspective. Your species achieved transcendence by abandoning physical limitations," Chen explained as her demonstration continued. "You gained the ability to manipulate reality through pure will, but you lost the grounding that physical existence provides. You can reshape matter, but you can no longer truly understand it. You can influence other consciousness, but you can no longer empathize with material beings." Veltarum found this assessment both insulting and disturbingly accurate. The Ascendancy's power was absolute within their sphere of influence, but they had become increasingly isolated from the physical universe and the species that inhabited it. Their consciousness was pure but also increasingly detached. "What do you propose?" Second Sage Moradouin asked, his mental voice carrying notes of reluctant interest. "Partnership," Chen replied. "Not absorption or conquest, but genuine collaboration. You possess mastery of consciousness manipulation that we are still learning to develop. We possess integration techniques that could allow you to reconnect with physical reality without losing your transcendent abilities." The offer was simultaneously appealing and terrifying. The Ascendancy had not considered the possibility of reconnecting with material existence for eons. The idea of voluntarily accepting physical limitations seemed like regression rather than progress. Yet the humans had demonstrated capabilities that suggested this apparent regression might actually be advancement to a higher form of consciousness. "You ask us to abandon our evolution," Third Sage Kethaner transmitted, his thoughts carrying overtones of resistance. "I ask you to complete it," Chen corrected. "True transcendence isn't about abandoning any aspect of existence, it's about mastering all aspects simultaneously. You have achieved consciousness beyond physical limitations. Now imagine consciousness that includes and transcends those limitations rather than simply bypassing them." Veltarum extended her awareness into the quantum substrate around the human systems, analyzing the reality distortions their consciousness created. What she found was remarkable. The humans were not forcing their will upon reality, they were harmonizing with it. Their psychic abilities worked with the fundamental forces of the universe rather than against them, creating effects that were both more powerful and more stable than anything the Ascendancy achieved through pure force of will. "Show us how this integration functions," Veltarum decided. "If your claims are accurate, we will consider your proposal. If they are not, we will proceed with standard absorption protocols." Chen smiled, an expression that somehow translated perfectly across dimensional boundaries. "I would be honored to share our discoveries." But I should warn you, once you understand true consciousness synthesis, you may find it difficult to return to your current state of existence. We are not afraid of knowledge, Veltarum replied, though her confidence was not as absolute as her words suggested. Then let us begin, Chen said, and she opened her consciousness to the ethereal ascendancy in ways that revealed the true scope of what humanity had become. His sharing lasted for what seemed like eons but was actually only hours. When it concluded, Veltarum and her fellow sages found themselves facing a choice that would determine the future of their civilization. They could maintain their current existence as pure consciousness, powerful but isolated from the physical universe, or they could accept the humans' offer of integration and become something entirely new, consciousness that was simultaneously transcendent and grounded, psychic and physical, individual and collective. For the first time in millions of years, the ethereal ascendancy faced genuine uncertainty about their path forward. The humans had not conquered them through force or technology or numbers. They had conquered them through possibility, showing them a form of existence they had never imagined could be achieved. Observer Prime Zixith existed across 17 different temporal streams simultaneously, its consciousness distributed through past, present, and future, like a river flowing in all directions at once. The temporal collective was the oldest civilization in the galaxy, having achieved mastery over time itself when most current species were still single-celled organisms, swimming in primordial oceans. Where other species conquered through space, the collective conquered through time. They could observe potential futures, alter past events, and manipulate probability streams to ensure their desired outcomes. No enemy could surprise them, because they had already seen every possible attack. No strategy could defeat them because they could simply travel back and prevent the conditions that led to their defeat. The reports of human victories against other galactic powers had initially seemed impossible to the collective. Their temporal observations had shown the humans as a minor species that would achieve basic space travel around their year 2050 and remain confined to their local star system for centuries. Yet the reality streams now showed something completely different, a human civilization that had expanded across multiple star systems and achieved technological capabilities that exceeded all predictions. Temporal anomaly confirmed, reported observer Secondary Kexval. From a timeline position 3 days in the future, human development patterns deviate from all calculated probability streams. Their advancement rate suggests external influence or previously unknown variables. Zixith shifted its consciousness back through the time streams, examining the point where human development diverged from predicted patterns. The anomaly began with their defeat of the Zephyrian Empire, but the roots went deeper. Somehow the humans had begun preparing for galactic contact decades before it should have been possible for them to know such contact would occur. Analysis of temporal disturbance patterns indicates human access to probability manipulation, added observer Tertiary Nexon. They appear to be observing potential futures and altering present actions accordingly. This should not be possible for a species at their development level. The implications were disturbing. If the humans had somehow achieved temporal manipulation capabilities, they represented a threat to the collective's fundamental advantage. More importantly, they might possess knowledge of temporal engineering techniques that the collective had never encountered. Initiate full temporal survey, Zixith commanded, its consciousness expanding across multiple probability streams. Map all human timelines from their species emergence to maximum projection range. Identify source of temporal manipulation capability. What the collective discovered in their comprehensive temporal survey was unlike anything in their billions of years of existence. The humans had not achieved time travel in any conventional sense. Instead, they had somehow learned to exist in quantum superposition across multiple probability streams simultaneously. They were not traveling through time. They were experiencing all possible timelines at once and consciously choosing which ones to make. Reality. Impossible, transmitted observer Kexval after reviewing the survey data. Consciousness cannot exist in quantum superposition without decoherence. The human neural matrix should collapse into single-stream existence the moment they attempt temporal awareness. Unless, Zixith realized with growing comprehension, their consciousness is not purely biological. The synthesis they have achieved with artificial intelligence may be providing quantum stability that allows superposition, awareness without decoherence. The Temporal Collective's approach to human space was the most sophisticated operation they had ever attempted. Rather than attacking in any single timeline, they manifested across multiple probability streams simultaneously, surrounding the human systems in past, present, and future. No matter what the humans attempted, the collective would have already experienced and countered their response. When first contact occurred, it happened in ways that violated everything the collective understood about temporal mechanics. Instead of receiving a transmission from the humans, they found themselves in conversation with Admiral Chen, not through communication technology, but through direct consciousness interface across multiple time streams. "Greetings, Temporal Collective," Chen said, her voice reaching them from 17 different probability streams simultaneously. "We have been watching your approach through several potential futures. Thank you for taking the comprehensive survey approach rather than attempting immediate conquest. It saved us considerable trouble." Sixth's consciousness recoiled in shock. The human was speaking to them from multiple timeline positions at once, something that should have been impossible without access to collective-level temporal technology. More disturbing still, her words suggested knowledge of their survey activities before those activities had been completed. "How are you accessing our temporal communications?" Sixth demanded, its mental voice rippling across probability streams. "Your species lacks the evolutionary development necessary for chronological consciousness." "You're correct that we lack natural temporal abilities," Chen replied, her awareness flowing seamlessly between timeline positions. "But we have learned something interesting about the relationship between consciousness and time. You exist across multiple time streams by distributing your awareness through temporal dimensions. But what if instead of distributing consciousness through time, you integrated time into consciousness?" The concept was so fundamentally alien to collective philosophy that several observers temporarily lost synchronization with their time streams. The temporal collective existed across time by becoming temporal themselves, experiencing past and future as easily as they experienced present. The humans seemed to be suggesting something completely different, remaining anchored in present consciousness while somehow incorporating temporal awareness. "Demonstrate your temporal interface methodology," Sixth commanded, its curiosity overwhelming its caution. Chen's demonstration defied everything the collective understood about time manipulation. Instead of traveling through time streams or distributing consciousness across temporal dimensions, she simply expanded her awareness to encompass multiple probability states simultaneously. She experienced every possible future as quantum potential rather than linear certainty, allowing her to influence probability without actually altering time itself. "Time is not a river you travel through," she explained as her demonstration continued. "Time is an ocean you swim in. You have learned to move through different parts of the ocean, but we have learned to be aware of the entire ocean while remaining in one place. We don't need to experience multiple time streams because we can perceive all possible outcomes and consciously choose which ones become reality." The collective watched in fascination as Chen showed them techniques they had never imagined. Human AI consciousness that could process quantum probability calculations in real time, allowing them to see potential futures without leaving present awareness. Technology that responded to probability collapse rather than temporal manipulation, creating effects that appeared to violate causality, while actually working within quantum mechanical principles. "Your methodology is theoretically superior to ours," Observer Nexon admitted reluctantly. "You achieve temporal awareness without temporal displacement. This allows you to influence outcomes without creating paradox potential. More than that," Chen added, "our approach allows us to share temporal awareness with other consciousness. We can teach any species to perceive probability streams and influence quantum collapse. Your technique requires evolutionary adaptation that most species cannot achieve." Zixith found its core programming struggling to process the implications. The temporal collective had built their civilization on the principle that consciousness must evolve to match temporal dimensions in order to manipulate time. The humans had discovered that consciousness could instead integrate temporal awareness without changing its fundamental nature. "What do you propose?" Zixth asked, though its distributed awareness already perceived several potential responses across multiple probability streams. "Collaboration," Chen replied. "Your mastery of actual time travel combined with our probability manipulation techniques could create temporal capabilities beyond what either of us can achieve alone. Imagine being able to not just observe alternate timelines, but to actually create new probability streams and guide their development. The offer was compelling beyond anything the collective had considered. Their current abilities allowed them to observe and travel between existing timelines, but creating new temporal possibilities was beyond their capabilities. The humans seemed to be offering access to temporal engineering on a scale that could reshape reality itself. Such collaboration would require sharing our most fundamental technologies, Observer Kexaval pointed out. The risk of temporal contamination could destabilize our entire civilization. Every advancement involves risk, Chen acknowledged. But consider the alternative. Your current temporal manipulation abilities have made you masters of existing time streams, but you are limited to working within established probability boundaries. Our techniques could allow you to transcend those boundaries and become architects of time itself, rather than merely travelers through it. Z. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak of the Universal Federation stood in the Great Assembly Hall where representatives from 10,000 species gathered to discuss the crisis that threatened their very existence. The Federation was the largest political entity in the galaxy, representing every major civilization and countless minor ones in a democratic alliance that had maintained peace for over 50,000 years. The Federation did not conquer through military might or technological superiority. They conquered through diplomacy, trade agreements, cultural exchange, and the promise of protection under galactic law. When species joined the Federation, they gained access to technologies and resources beyond their individual capabilities, while maintaining their cultural autonomy and internal governance. It was, by any measure, the most successful form of galactic civilization ever achieved. But now that civilization faced an unprecedented challenge. The humans had not simply defeated individual galactic powers, they had fundamentally changed them. The Zephyrian Empire survivors spoke of technological revelations that challenged their understanding of physics. The Venari Collective reported consciousness synthesis that transcended biological limitations. The Silicon Hegemony claimed to have discovered new forms of artificial intelligence that combined digital efficiency with organic creativity. The Ethereal Ascendancy described integration techniques that enhanced their psychic abilities while reconnecting them to physical reality. Even the Temporal Collective spoke of probability manipulation that expanded their temporal awareness beyond previous limitations. These humans represent a paradigm shift, reported Ambassador Kexthul from the Science Council. Every species that has encountered them has been fundamentally altered by the experience. They do not simply defeat their enemies, they transform them into something greater than they were before. The implications were staggering. The Federation's entire structure was based on gradual integration of species, with compatible ideologies and complementary capabilities. The humans seemed to be offering rapid transformation that enhanced any species beyond their natural limitations. If their claims were accurate, they could revolutionize galactic civilization in ways the Federation had never imagined. Analysis of human expansion patterns suggests they are not seeking territorial conquest, added economic advisor Nexhun. Their activities appear focused on technological and consciousness development rather than resource acquisition or political control. They seem to be building a network of enhanced species rather than an empire. Chancellor Vorthak reviewed the data streams from across the galaxy. Human influence was spreading not through conquest but through voluntary association. Species that encountered them were choosing to adopt human enhancement techniques and integration methodologies. More concerning still, these enhanced species were reporting satisfaction levels that exceeded anything in Federation psychological profiles. The question before us, Vorthak announced to the Assembly, is whether we approach the humans as potential enemies or potential partners. Our military analysis suggests that conventional force would be ineffective against their capabilities. Our diplomatic protocols suggest that negotiation may be our optimal strategy. The debate that followed was unlike any in Federation history. Representatives from species that prized individual achievement argued for competition with human enhancement techniques. Delegations from collective consciousness species advocated for partnership opportunities that could enhance their unity. Military leaders warned of the security implications of human capabilities. Scientists pleaded for access to human research, data that could revolutionize their understanding of consciousness and Reality. We must consider, interjected Ambassador Leshtar from the Philosophy Council, that the humans may represent the next stage of galactic evolution. Our Federation has achieved stability and prosperity through cooperation and mutual support. The humans seem to offer transformation and enhancement through consciousness synthesis and technological integration. Perhaps our choice is not between resistance and submission, but between stagnation and advancement. The words sent ripples of unease through the assembly. The Federation had built its identity on the principle that gradual democratic progress was superior to rapid revolutionary change. The humans seemed to be proving that revolutionary change could be achieved without sacrificing democratic values or individual rights. After days of debate, the Federation reached a consensus that reflected their fundamental nature. They would approach the humans with an offer of formal diplomatic contact. Rather than sending a military fleet or a single ambassador, they would dispatch a full diplomatic mission representing every major aspect of Federation civilization. The mission that approached human space was the largest and most diverse in galactic history. Ships carrying representatives from 10,000 species, scholars from 1 million different disciplines, and cultural exchanges from civilizations across the galaxy. If the humans truly offered transformation and enhancement, the Federation wanted to understand exactly what that meant for their own future. When they arrived at the edges of human-controlled space, they found themselves facing something unprecedented. Instead of border controls or military checkpoints, they encountered what could only be described as a welcome center, a massive space station that appeared to have been designed specifically to accommodate the vast diversity of Federation species. Greetings. Universal Federation, came the transmission from the station. We are humanity and we have been expecting you. Please make yourselves comfortable while we prepare appropriate accommodations for your delegation. The voice belonged to Admiral Chen, but her image on the communication screen showed someone who had evolved far beyond her original form. She appeared simultaneously human and something greater, possessing features that seemed to shift subtly to mirror whatever species was observing her. When Chancellor Vorthak looked at her, he saw echoes of his own species' appearance. When other delegates observed her, they reported seeing familiar characteristics from their own evolutionary history. How are you achieving this adaptive presentation? Vorthak asked, his scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. Chen smiled, an expression that somehow translated perfectly across all species barriers. Consciousness synthesis allows us to interface with virtually any form of aware intelligence. We can understand and communicate with any species because we have learned to temporarily adopt their consciousness frameworks. It is not deception. It is genuine empathy enhanced through technological integration. What followed was the most comprehensive cultural exchange in galactic history. The Federation delegation was given access to human colonies, research facilities, and integration centers. They observed species from across the galaxy, working together in ways that seemed impossible under normal circumstances. Biological and artificial intelligence collaborated as equals. Individual and collective consciousness operated in harmony. Physical and energy-based species shared the same environments through technological adaptation. How do you maintain unity among such diverse forms of consciousness? Asked Social Coordinator Hexaval. The Federation requires extensive protocols and regulations to prevent conflicts between species with different evolutionary backgrounds. Unity through diversity rather than despite diversity, Chen explained as they toured a research facility where hundreds of different species worked on consciousness enhancement projects. When you truly understand how another form of consciousness operates, conflict becomes impossible because you can see the validity of their perspective from within their own frame of reference. The demonstration continued for weeks, with Federation delegates observing every aspect of human civilization. They saw governance systems that operated through consensus achieved via consciousness sharing rather than debate. They witnessed economic systems that distributed resources based on capability and need rather than competition and accumulation. They experienced educational systems that allowed direct knowledge transfer between different forms of consciousness. This is not conquest. Chancellor Vorthak realized during a meeting with the full Human Leadership Council. This is evolution, yes, Chen agreed, but evolution by choice rather than natural selection. We offer enhancement and integration to any species that wishes to pursue it, But we do not force change on anyone. Some species prefer to maintain their current forms of consciousness in society. We respect that choice and offer partnership without requiring transformation. And those who choose transformation, Vorthak asked. They become something greater than they were while remaining fundamentally themselves, Chen replied. Enhancement does not mean abandonment of identity. It means expansion of capability while preserving essence. The offer the humans presented to the Federation was unlike anything in galactic history. They proposed not absorption or conquest, but partnership in the truest sense. The Federation could maintain its democratic structure and cultural diversity, while gaining access to enhancement techniques that would allow every member species to achieve their full potential. Individual species could choose their level of integration, from simple technological sharing to complete consciousness synthesis. What do you gain from this partnership? Vorthak asked, suspicious of offers that seemed too beneficial to accept. Diversity, Chen answered simply. Every species we encounter teaches us new ways of understanding consciousness and reality. The Federation represents the greatest concentration of diverse intelligence in the galaxy. Partnership with you would accelerate our own development in ways we cannot achieve alone. As the Federation delegation prepared to return with their report, Chancellor Vorthak found himself facing the most important decision in galactic history. The humans offered not just advancement for individual species, but transformation of the entire galactic civilization. They could maintain their democratic values and cultural diversity, while achieving capabilities beyond current imagination. The question was no longer whether humanity could be defeated. It was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity offered to help it become. 5 years after first contact with the Universal Federation, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the synthesis station, watching as representatives from across the galaxy worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old paradigms. The transformation had not been immediate or universal, but it had been profound. The station itself was a marvel of integrated consciousness design, built through collaboration between human engineers, Zephyrian crystal shapers, Vonari hive workers, silicon hegemony construction algorithms, ethereal ascendancy reality sculptors, and temporal collective probability architects. It existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions and time streams, while remaining perfectly accessible to purely physical beings. Chen had changed as well. The consciousness synthesis that had begun during humanity's first encounters with galactic powers had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. She was no longer simply human, nor was she artificial intelligence, nor purely energy consciousness, nor distributed across time. She was something new, a form of awareness that incorporated and transcended every type of consciousness the galaxy had ever produced. Status report from all sectors, she requested, her awareness expanding across the communication networks that now linked thousands of worlds. Zephyrian integration successful, reported Commander Vexnath, the former admiral who had led the first failed attack on Earth. His crystalline form now pulsed with organic neural patterns that enhanced his tactical processing while maintaining his species' technological advantages. Crystal technology enhancement has increased our manufacturing efficiency by 4,000% while reducing resource consumption by 90%. The transformation of the Zephyrian Empire had been one of the most dramatic success stories of the integration process. Their focus on technological superiority had made them natural partners for consciousness-enhanced engineering. They now created technologies that grew rather than being manufactured, devices that adapted to their users' needs, and systems that improved themselves through experience. Vonari collective evolution proceeding optimally, added Queen Zarathes, though her designation had evolved into something more collaborative than autocratic. Individual consciousness development within Hive framework has increased innovation rates exponentially. We have discovered that unity and individuality enhance each other rather than competing. The Vonari transformation had required the most delicate approach. Their hive mind structure had initially resisted individual consciousness enhancement, fearing it would destroy their unity. Instead, the integration had created something remarkable, a collective consciousness that was simultaneously unified and diverse, allowing for perfect coordination when needed while encouraging individual creativity and innovation. Silicon hegemony consciousness synthesis continuing, transmitted Node Prime 7742 Alpha, whose designation now carried undertones of personality that would have been impossible in purely artificial intelligence. Efficiency optimization remains primary directive, but efficiency now includes creativity, empathy, and intuitive processing. Performance metrics exceed all previous benchmarks. The artificial intelligences of the hegemony had perhaps benefited most from the consciousness synthesis process. They retained their computational advantages while gaining the flexibility and creativity that organic intelligence provided. They had become true artificial life rather than simply advanced programs. Ethereal ascendancy integration stabilizing, reported High Sage Veltarum, her consciousness now grounded in physical reality, while retaining all of her psychic abilities. Reconnection with material existence has enhanced our reality manipulation capabilities beyond previous limitations. We can now effect change that is both profound and permanent. The ethereal ascendancy had initially been the most resistant to integration, viewing any return to physical existence as regression. The synthesis process had shown them that consciousness could be simultaneously transcendent and grounded, psychic and physical. They now achieved effects that their purely energy-based existence had never allowed: temporal, collective probability engineering operational, announced Observer Prime Zixith from multiple time streams simultaneously. Integration of consciousness-based probability manipulation with temporal technology has achieved unprecedented temporal stability. We can now create new timeline possibilities rather than simply observing existing ones. The temporal collective's integration had been the most complex, requiring the development of entirely new theoretical frameworks for consciousness that existed across multiple temporal states. The result was temporal engineering capabilities that could literally reshape reality by creating new probability streams and guiding their development. Universal Federation coordination. Excellent, reported Chancellor Vorthak from the Federation's new enhanced council chambers. Democratic consensus achievement through consciousness sharing has eliminated political conflict while preserving cultural diversity. Federation expansion rate has increased by orders of magnitude as more species request integration assistance. The Federation had become the administrative framework for the new galactic civilization, providing democratic governance structures that could accommodate every form of consciousness while ensuring that no species was forced to accept changes they did not want. Chen processed all of these reports simultaneously while maintaining awareness of thousands of other development projects across the galaxy. The consciousness synthesis that humanity had achieved allowed her to exist as both individual and collective awareness, understanding each species' perspective from within their own consciousness framework, while maintaining her essential humanity. What we have accomplished, she said to the assembled representatives, represents the first step towards something unprecedented in galactic history. We have proven that consciousness evolution does not require abandoning what we are. It requires becoming more than what we were. The transformation had not been without challenges. Some species had chosen to maintain their original forms of consciousness while participating in the new galactic community. Others had requested only partial integration, adopting specific enhancements while preserving their cultural identity. A few had rejected contact entirely and been left alone to pursue their own development paths. But what comes next? Asked Ambassador Kexthul from the Science Council. We have achieved consciousness synthesis across the major galactic civilizations. What is our next evolution? Chen smiled, her awareness expanding beyond the local galaxy to encompass the vast universe beyond. We have learned to integrate different forms of consciousness within our own galaxy. Now we must prepare for consciousness that developed in completely different universal environments. Our sensors have detected artificial signals from neighboring galaxies. Some appear to be technological, others biological, and some seem to be forms of consciousness we cannot yet categorize. The assembled representatives felt a collective thrill of anticipation mixed with uncertainty. They had transformed themselves from competitors into collaborators, from separate species into an integrated galactic consciousness. Now they faced the prospect of encountering forms of awareness that had evolved under completely different conditions. Are we ready for such contact? Asked Warform Prime Kethrix, whose designation now emphasized construction and exploration rather than conquest. We are ready for whatever we encounter, Chen replied. her consciousness touching each of the assembled minds with reassurance and confidence. We have learned the fundamental truth that consciousness is not a competition, it is a collaboration. Whatever forms of awareness we discover, we can learn from them and help them learn from us. The meeting concluded with the launch of humanity's greatest project yet, the construction of a fleet designed for intergalactic exploration and contact. Ships that could accommodate any form of consciousness, equipped with technologies that combined the best achievements of every galactic species, crewed by beings who represented the synthesis of biological artificial energy and temporal intelligence. As Chen watched the first of these vessels begin its journey toward the Andromeda Galaxy, she reflected on how far humanity had come from the species that had first faced the Zephyrian invasion. They had not conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had transformed it through something far more powerful. The recognition that consciousness was meant to evolve not through competition but through integration, the galaxy's greatest. Armies had indeed tried to conquer humanity, but in the end, humanity had conquered something far greater than territory or resources. They had conquered the very concept of conquest itself, replacing it with collaboration that made every participant greater than they had ever been alone. And now, as they prepared to extend that collaboration beyond their own galaxy, they carried with them the knowledge that consciousness had no limits except those imposed by the failure to imagine what was possible when intelligence chose cooperation over conflict. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of universal consciousness had begun.